So first I should mention, yes, as you may have just noticed when you joined, this session is being recorded. It will be available as a link sent to everyone who registered for this program after today's events conclude. And I want to give a quick thank you to Eloa Sharp, our friend and colleague at ACRL, who created this platform for us to be on here today and is making all of this run smoothly in the background. So thank you, Elois. As I said, my name is Diane D'Estefazio. I am the editor of RBM, a journal for rare books, manuscripts, and cultural heritage. And I am delighted that you are all here today and interested in learning more about publishing from not only me and John Henry, the RBM Reviews editor, but all of our other colleagues who were able to participate in today's forum on publishing. A couple of announcements. Today's forum is supposed to be as casual and friendly as possible, though we will be recording it. The speakers will each give an elevator pitch about their journal or reviews that they represent, and then we'll open the entire rest of the hour for questions. So as we go along, if you have questions, feel free to type them directly into the chat, which I will be monitoring, or use the raise hand function and wait to be called on. That's about it for me. So without further ado, I'm going to call on each of the panelists individually, who will then speak a little bit about what they do, and we'll go on from there. So I didn't create any kind of order in which to call on the panelists, so I will start with John Henry Adams, who is the reviews editor for RBM.
Hi, yeah. Like you said, my name is John Henry Adams. I handle the reviews portion of RBM. And so RBM specifically covers basically anything, whether like new books, periodicals, reports, exhibits, catalogs, although we haven't done catalogs in a while, databases, websites, blogs, etc., that are related to cultural heritage, right? So typically that does take the form of either special collections or archives. But it can also include museums and in general, any kind of cultural heritage institution, right? And so that's it's a very broad sort of scope. And I, would just encourage you, as with all of us, right? Don't be intimidated by the idea of submitting a review, right? You can sign up for, let me just put it in the chat, right? So that we have a little website. Make life easier for people, right? You can put your name forward, even if you haven't, this is a great way to dip your toe into publishing if you haven't done it before, as well as giving you that sort of opportunity to come to grips with what is current in the field, what is coming out right now. And yeah, so that's essentially that's the area that we cover, and those are the reviews, types of things that we review. And I will kick it back to you, Diane.
Thank you, John Henry. Up next, we will go to Jen Hoyer, who's representing Partnership, the Canadian Journal of Library and Information Practice and Research.
Thanks so much, Diane. Yeah, my name is Jen Hoyer, and I am a section editor for the Partnership Journal, which is a shorter way of saying that very long mouthful of a journal name that Diane just read out. And I just put a link to our website and my personal contact email in the chat. So I'm a section editor at Partnership, and I've been doing that for a little over 5 years now. I'm also a past editor of the SAA case studies in teaching with primary sources, and I am not here to speak about those case studies today, but I will just give that a plug because I don't see anyone else here specifically to talk about that, and I think that's a great publishing venue as well. But to talk about Partnership, So Partnership is the Journal of Canada's network of provincial and territorial library associations. And I've been working in the US for a while now, but have really enjoyed staying connected with my Canadian library community that way. This journal is not specifically about book or print history, but it has a lot of room in it for that. And I am always really delighted when I see that kind of content come in and be in dialogue with lots of other kinds of things in the journal. And so to give a little info about what kinds of material the Partnership Journal welcomes, I've just put another link in the chat to our section policies. We have 3 sections. 2 of them go through double anonymized peer review, our theory and research and our innovations in practice sections. And then one, the features section, just goes through editorial review. And so there's a ton of space within those sections for people to write different kinds of content and have different kinds of scholarly conversations. Occasionally there are special issues related to a specific theme, but for the most part, content is open to contributions on any topic that fits those section policies. And I think I'll leave it there for now, and I'm looking forward to questions and chatting more about publishing, spaces for publishing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Up next, I will select Sarah Werner.
Hi all, I am Sarah Werner. I am co-editor of the Papers of the Bibliographical Society of America, which we typically refer to just as PBSA. But we are a journal that is housed in the Bibliographical Society of America, and we focus on bibliography, but nobody ever knows what bibliography means, including those of us who are bibliographers. So we tend to define it as our focus is on textual artifacts, exploring the production, the care, the use, the collection of textual artifacts. So not so much literary analysis, but everything from how is something made to how is it used, how is it disseminated, the full scope of that sort of studies of materiality. We publish articles, typical academic articles, bibliographical notes, which are really handy when you have something that you have found and discovered, you've unearthed some information that you want to share that you're not necessarily making an argument about, but you want people to know, to do more research on. We have a section called Reflections on Bibliographical Work. I should know what that's called because I started that, which is a place that is provides space for different types of writing about bibliography. So things like a sort of more personal style, if you want to sort of talk about the work that you do, the work that goes into creating bibliographical resources. So I'm flagging that section in part because I am deeply sympathetic to the amount of time that it can take authors to produce a work. And for those of us who might be working in institutions that don't necessarily have that kind of research as part of your job, sometimes what you have time to do is maybe sort of like a 3,000 to 6,000 word piece that could be very important, but it's not a 12,000 word article. We also publish reviews of books, resources, anything that's a resource for bibliography. We have a dedicated reviews editor who has just started and so is not here with us today. But you can find out a little bit more about various different things that we publish through we're published by Chicago is the press. So I've dropped in a link to our pages there, which can give a little bit more information about the sort of things that we do. Thanks, Diane.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, so I see that one of our panelists just arrived, so I'm not going to select him to go right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg Barnheisel. He is the co-editor of the paper, or sorry, I read the wrong thing, of Book History, which is organized by the Society of the History of Authorship, Reading, and Publishing, otherwise known as SHARP. Greg.
Oh, thanks, Diane. Hi, everybody. As Diane said, my name is Greg Barnheisel, and I'm one of the 3 editors of the scholarly journal Book History, which is a peer-reviewed scholarly journal that currently publishes twice annually. I'm located here in the United States, and I handle articles that are about North American topics. And our other two editors, both this is an English only journal, but our other two editors, oddly enough, one of them is located in Norway. That's Yuri Cowan, and his purview is articles having to do with Europe and England. And then our third editor is Beth LaRue. She is located in South Africa at the University of Pretoria, and she deals with articles about the rest of the world and digital matters. And her specialty is also contemporary publishing, so things like that. And I have put my contact information and the website of the journal here. I'm dropping it in the chat right now. So our journal is, as Diane said, the official publication of the Society for the History of Authorship, Reading, and Publishing, and it is devoted to every aspect of the history of the book. So it's in many ways a little more general than some of the other journals here. So we define, and prepare yourself for a long list, we define the history of the book as the history of the creation, dissemination, and reception of script and print. We publish research on the social, economic, and cultural history of authorship, editing, publishing, printing, the book arts, the book trade, periodicals, newspapers, ephemera, copyright, censorship, literary agents, libraries, literary criticism, canon formation, literacy education, reading habits, and reader response. And we even, I don't know if you've seen some of the recent articles that have come out about this, and we even publish articles about anthropodermic bibliophagy, which is the binding of books in human skin. So if you've got one of those, we would welcome it, and it would join one that we've already published. Obviously, our remit overlaps with those of many of the other journals represented here, many of which are older. We've only been around for about 27 years now, but we see ourselves as the flagship generalist journal in book history. So it's the one that sort of explains why, for example, an article on Hebrew manuscript scrolls and an article on user data from Goodreads belong in the same bucket. Our readers and contributors are working in vastly different periods, geographical areas, and methodologies. So we are looking for articles that don't just speak to people who are working in a relatively narrow field, but that contextualize themselves in larger scholarly discussions across those boundaries. For the most part, we only run primary research-based articles, although we do try to run at least one state of the discipline article per year on things like the state of book history in India or the state of manuscript studies. We do not, though, run book reviews. That is the job of our sister publication, Sharp News. Our contributors as well cross boundaries. Most are professors, but just in the last few years, we've run articles by librarians, booksellers, and independent researchers. Although we would like to be open access, we are not at this point due to our role as a revenue source for our sponsoring society. But we retain no ownership or copyright over authors' materials, so you're free to do anything you want with your articles after publication. And finally, although we remain a print journal, which is appropriate to my mind given their subject matter, we maintain a companion website, Book History Unbound, where authors can post digital material accompanying their articles that is not suited for the print journal. So everything from color photos to searchable databases, even video presentations of the articles. And Sarah, the editor of BBSA, is actually in charge of that. I would strongly encourage anyone working on projects about the creation, dissemination, and reception of script and print materials to submit your pieces to us, or if you have questions about whether your piece might be appropriate, to contact me, Yuri, or Beth. And as like I said, my contact information is in the chat. Thanks.
Awesome. That's so great. Thank you so much, Greg. That was really comprehensive and very useful. I hope that everyone thought of something fun and new to send to you. I certainly thought about things that I should be saying about RBM, but I also want to take this as an opportunity to remind everyone to keep an eye on the chat, because we are just throwing all sorts of important links and useful information in that as we go along. Sarah has lots of tidbits on Sharp that she shared for one. All right, I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague, Joseph Beery, who was able to join us, hooray. Joseph is the Vice President for Publications of the American Printing History Association, or APHA. And Joseph, please do tell us about APHA's journal.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Again, I'm Joseph Beery. I have been the Vice President for Publications at the American Printing History Association for several years now. And I just got reelected for another term. I am proud to be the managing editor of Printing History, our journal, which again, very much like Greg's journal, comes out twice a year in print. We are thrilled that it's in print. We also have a very generalist journal looking to present papers on just about just about anything regarding the history of the book, the history of printing, the history of publishing. And to that end, we solicit work from all over. We get international submissions from graduate students as well as credentialed professors. And we have an editorial board which reviews these submissions and decides what's appropriate for our publication. We have been around since the 1970s, coming up on our 50th anniversary. And we've been through a lot of bibliographic history in that time. I think most everybody knows somebody who's been involved with the American Printing History Association. And if you're not familiar with us, I hope that you'll go to our website, which is printinghistory.org. We also right now make the journal available as a premium of being a member in the American Printing History Association. We also make it available through digital indexing and archiving through Gale and EBSCO. So it is possible to find it through your institutional databases. This is something that concerns me because I'd like to see us have a much wider readership than we have right now, especially in light of the just challenges of putting out a print journal and I think, responsibility we have to those people who submit to our journal to provide them with as wide a readership as possible. I'd like to think that more members of the general public can read our journal without having to face the hurdle of being a member of an institution or getting through the detailed processes of connecting to Gale or EBSCO once they are at the New York Public Library or elsewhere. The journal right now tends to focus one issue a year on our conference, which we hold every October. Our most recent issue is being developed on the conference we had last fall, which was called The Printed Weird. It was in conjunction with the University of Texas Ransom Center. It will be coming out in the summer issue. Our last issue, most recent issue, came out in January and featured articles from across a gamut, including wood type manufacturer stamps, the whole question of the jikji and its printing with movable type, brass movable type in the end of the 14th century, an article on Cherokee printing and the Sequoia syllabary, and an article on the Samson Press, a little known press run by two women in the early 20th century in Britain. So we run these two issues, one which is general and then one which focuses on our conference every year. We are right now, as a result of a very generous gift, looking for a full-time, well, not full-time, a part-time editor for the journal. And so we're accepting applications at printinghistory.org. Publications at printinghistory.org is the email. And this is a position which will be responsible for soliciting and organizing the editing and review of articles for the two issues of our journal. If you all have any questions about our journal, please feel free to email me. And yeah, it's good to see everybody.
Yay. Thank you, Joseph. I realize that this also leaves me to talk about RBM. I'm not merely your host and facilitator. I am also the editor of RBM. Hello. Some of you know from, I came on as editor of RBM last July. It is the flagship journal, I say that with half air quotes, of the rare books and manuscripts section of ACRL, but it is in fact not really our journal. It's an ACRL publication. It's our parent organization. It comes out twice a year. I provided a very broad and liberal look at the future of RBM under my editorship in the fall volume. It's published twice a year, fall and spring, so generally November and more or less May. And we used to publish 3 articles and 3 book reviews every journal, and now maybe it's looking like that's going to be somewhat different. The upcoming issue has 17 contributors. It has updates from the RBMS leadership, so section chair Sarah Horowitz and the upcoming conference co-chairs give little previews as to what else is going on to kind of bring it back to the work of what members in RBMS are doing. But I did notice that there are a few of you joining the call today who are applicants for the editorial board, and I'm excited and thrilled that you are here, because that is the thing that you can do in terms of service to RBMS. So if you're an ALA member and you're part of RBMS, you can, or frankly, if you're a part of ACRL rather, the Association of College and Research Libraries, who is hosting this event today, you can apply to be a member of the editorial board and then help with the mechanics of what putting a journal issue is together. RBM is a double-blind, peer-reviewed academic journal covering roughly, like my colleagues here today, anything and everything in terms of special collections, manuscripts, and this broad and nebulous thing I'm calling cultural heritage, which means if you work in museums or museum education or historic landmarks or anything else fun, please do reach out if you have stories to tell about your work, even if it's a spectacular failure, because that's the kind of content we're looking for going forward. So zines, artist books, pop-up libraries, basically everything that all of my other editorial colleagues mentioned. I'd like to see that too, if you got it and you don't give it to them first, that's okay. Let me think. Probably leaving out a lot, but it'll come to me. I just was really blown away by Greg's introduction because it was so well organized and thoughtful. Oh, there are 2 things that I will add to the chat. We are always, always, always looking for peer reviewers. And so you can submit your information as to your areas of interest and specialization to a handy dandy online form. I just put that in the chat. And also there is a shorter, more, I don't know, Instagram friendly link to submit if you're interested in reviewing, and that would go eventually to John Henry. So I put those both in the chat. That's it from me for right now. So again, it is now the time where we open up to questions from all of you. It's always hard to be the first person to ask questions. I will give the panelists an opportunity now to ask questions of each other if they have any.
Can I ask a question? It's sort of a leading question, but it might be helpful for our audience, and I'm happy to answer after I hear your answers. But I'm wondering if, especially the folks who are handling not just reviews, but article submissions to the journal, what's the thing that you see that makes a submission most likely to succeed or least likely to succeed? So I can sort of start to give you an example of what I mean. If you give us a submission that's not about bibliography, obviously that will, I mean, but we do. I think all of our journals do. Sometimes you get blind things. So know your source. The biggest thing that I see is know what your, wait, how can I say this? Know what your argument is, and then don't beat around the bush making it. Be really upfront. This is what my point is. I'm going to tell you what my point is, and now I'm going to make my 5 substantive things to go with it. I just realized I was drawing on the sort of like weird 5-paragraph essays that we all learned in high school. But a sort of clarity we find really helpful on our end as handling editors. Makes it easier for us to identify who we can send it to for peer review, and also you as an author making a case for why not just we, the journals, but also readers will want to learn from you. Is really helpful for me. I just was really curious what other editors might advise in terms of what makes submissions stand out or not stand out.
I can chime in really quickly. I think the thing that is most often when I'm looking at new submissions, most often the thing that I have to go back to authors and say, listen, like this really doesn't work yet, is when it just doesn't actually fit what the section policy says. And most specifically, how I see that happening, I am specifically the section editor for the Innovations in Practice section of Partnership Journal. And I'm going to put that section description in the chat so you can also see it, but I'll read it out. It says this section publishes articles that describe and evaluate new library initiatives, which like we can call anything new, right? Like we can spin anything as new. So this is really broad. But then it goes on to say articles should critically analyze the impetus, implementation, challenges, and outcome of the initiative, and include some research into the context for the innovative practice through a literature review. And it goes on a little more, but I will say the thing that I see over and over and over is submissions that don't have a literature review, because people are like, well, this is a new thing, right? You want something innovative, so there's no literature on it, but it still comes out of other conversations that are happening in our profession, and we want to ground it in that. And so I really frequently just don't see a lit review, and I have to go back to folks and say, like, you need to be in conversation with what's happening in the field. Please, I know that you are in your head. So please articulate that for us, and then I'm really excited to read it again.
I would say that at Printing History, what we're most interested in is new ideas, new information, new discoveries. When I joined the American Printing History Association, we seemed to be focused very much on rather standard topics concerning letterpress printing, bookbinding, European bookbinding, and a lot of Western focused topics. Indeed, we are the American Printing History Association, and there is a similar organization in the UK, but we are very interested in the history of printing throughout the world. And I would say now, 15 years later, after joining American Printing History Association, I'm proud to say that the field of printing history is very, very dynamic. The discovery of movable metal type being used in Korea, the research that's being done on books and publication in South Asia and in other countries is just fascinating, and there's lots of work to be done. We published an entire issue on printing history in Latin America, and we found that to be very popular in terms of submissions. And I think there's just a lot of exciting work to be done. In terms of what's going to be accepted, I'm fortunate to say that I'm not part of that decision-making process. We have a very nice editorial committee who reviews the submissions. We pretty much initially accept everything and pass that on to our editorial committee, and they comment, and we get back to the submitters. We also should let people know that similar to what Greg mentioned, we do make things available that would not be printed in our journal on our website. And these are things that are not necessarily peer reviewed. They're more casual presentations, which then, because of the opportunities we have with digital presentation on the web, people can comment on and start conversations. So I think that having a two-pronged publication opportunity or venues is a great thing to offer the community. Yeah, thanks.
I'll just echo, especially what Sarah and Jennifer were saying, that it's got to have an argument. Sociologists and bibliographers and historians are really great at doing case studies, and we get a lot of case studies. But oftentimes, when we have to send it back to an author, it's because the fundamental argument of the case study is, here's a thing. And what we need is, here's a thing, and here's how it's going to change the way we think about this thing that other people know about. And so, I mean, that's what Jennifer was referring to in terms of the lit review, because here's what other people are saying about this thing. Here's my case study, and here's how it's going to change this. So I would say when we send pieces back for revision, over 50% of the time, it's the advice is foreground your argument, make sure the reader knows what your argument is. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
That reminded me, gosh, I knew I would forget things. Yeah, so RBM is an open access journal. And for the most part, we do get a lot of case studies as well. It's like just de rigueur, like, oh, I'm in academia, so I will write a case study of my thing, and that's fine. We love you for it. Thank you, keep it up. But the thing that I've seen in my very short tenure as editor is a lot of first-time submissions, like long-time listener, first-time caller kind of thing, where it's like, here is this paper that I wrote, and I would love to know how to turn it into something that looks like journal content. So from that perspective, it's kind of like echoing what Jen was saying. It's like, you need to have a literature review, or I know that my predecessor would send out kind of like how-to guides, like best practices for writing this kind of a thing, just as a way to gently guide people along. But generally, I'm trying to think, but in the last little while when I got a bunch of submissions for our current issue, it was just, the common element was really people who were excited rather about talking about their work. So translating that excitement into like readable content can be a journey either way.
Well, and I think that that's like the sort of word, like usable content, right? I think that's also part of the underlying sort of thread that we've seen throughout all of these responses, right? It's utility, right? What is the point? You know, there is a degree to which, of course, every item is exciting. Every case study is exciting in its own right. Just, it's nice to know that new things have happened. But how can I, at a different institution or with a different collection at my fingertips, translate that into something that is practical for my own use? Right. And so that's sort of you have to be responding to something, you have to be intervening into the field, and you need to be giving advice effectively, right? This is important because ... right? And you fill in the ... right? Which is a similar sort of approach to the one that I look for in a good review, right? Is the sense of, for whom is this book useful and for what is this useful? And then I also like to have the sort of square brackets, and for what project is it not useful, right? Something can be a very excellent book or a very excellent resource without being useful for all contexts, right? And there is no shame in that, right? A book or an article or a resource does not have to be the Swiss Army knife that solves all of our problems. And so part of the reason people turn to book reviews is so that they don't have to read every book to find the one that's useful for their project. And one of the reasons that people read articles is partially because we're curious and excited to learn more about our field, but partially it's also, what is it about this that I can deploy for my own projects, for my own ideas, for my own thinking, to improve my teaching, my research, my scholarship, whatever it is that you want to sort of say. And so I think that the degree of being cognizant of this article is not going to be all things to all people. It doesn't have to be. It can be just useful for a specific section, but then you have to say, these people are going to want to use this for these reasons. And don't hide, don't bury the lead. Just tell us right up front, this is going to be useful for these reasons. Now let me take you on a journey, right?
And I love that, John Henry, bringing in what is a good book review, because I was thinking, a lot of the qualities, I just like how you tied together. I think a lot of the qualities that we look for and what a good article is also true for a good review. You don't want to just sort of like describe what the book being reviewed is, because that's what publishers' puffs are for. That sense of like tying it into, this is what this book does. Who is it for? Does it succeed in what it wants to do? Does it not succeed, or maybe it succeeds in other ways? Book reviews are great. I'll just say I don't edit the section, but like as a researcher, I rely so heavily, I'm sure we all do, on book reviews. There's too much stuff being, there's such a I won't do it in the negative. There's such a glorious plethora of scholarship being published that I cannot possibly read it all. And so reviews can really, and good articles can really help us sort of navigate and find what we are looking for, as opposed to drowning in delightful information. I should add that PBSA does, like we do publish book reviews. It's just that that's not really my corner of the journal.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing to that for all the attendees and everyone who registered but couldn't attend and is watching the recording. In one of the email blasts about this event, I had listed a couple of people who were also in book reviews. And unfortunately, both of their schedules changed at the last minute, so they couldn't join us today. So our apologies for that, leaving John Henry as the sole book reviews person on board. But nonetheless, I know that maybe we'll share as much as we can for their contact information and their latest call for reviewers in the information that we give to everyone at the end of this event. I do have a question about book reviews that maybe other folks are wondering about. How, and John Henry, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but can you talk a little bit about how the books / websites / etc. Are selected that are eventually turned into reviews?
Sure. So, and I can only speak to RBM. But the way that we do it is that there are two main sources of where these sort of reviews where these items come from, right? One of them is me, right? If I see a book that I'm sort of, I'm always on the prowl, as it were, looking for what is a new resource? What is something that I might want to, that I think is important, right? That it has to go into the review simply because it's in the zeitgeist, people are hearing about it, people are talking about it. And then I know that, like Sarah said, I don't have time to read every single book out there. So if I do find a book, if a lot of people are talking about a book and I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be, yes, why am I not reading this, right? Then I go to look at, then I want to see, I'm going to check some of the old standbys of like, has any of these journals published a review? The other sort of so part of it is me paying attention to what's coming out. But another sort of element is you, the people, right? You can recommend. So we have a form that you can fill out, not only one that says, oh, I would dearly love to do a book review for you, but also there is this one book or resource that you should have a review of. And sometimes people are combining that with, and I would like to be the person who fills out that review, right? But sometimes it is not, sometimes it's literally just a sort of like, and I'll put it in the chat, right? That if there's a resource that people are excited to see us review, right, that would be one place to sort of drop it. So I generally, if I hear about a book that I haven't read, but it seems really is quite new from the last year or so, then I add it to my list. And then there are a couple of publishers that who consistently, like Rowman and Littlefield, for example, who publish consistently, or Oak Knoll Press, who can publish consistently in these areas. And then I sort of watch their new publication list. And I imagine, though I don't know, that this is how most book review editors handle this sort of question.
I dropped a couple of links in the chat for PBSA. PBSA does it very much like what you just described, John Henry. It's a combination of the reviews editor, scouting, publishers send a ton of, lists out constantly. And also PBSA is in a position, since we're linked to BSA, there's all these people who get BSA funding to do fellowships and to write reports. So that gives us a sort of like a host of people to keep track of, like they got a fellowship in 2015 and now it's a book. Because that timing actually probably is about right, 9 years. And suggestions for people, like we really welcome, because we cannot, especially because the breadth, the reviewer can be a great person, but they're not necessarily going to be able to cover all of that. So we rely really heavily on readers being able to say, this is something that should be reviewed, even if they themselves don't want to review it. I was just going to point out, Jen asked a really great prompt for questions from the audience in the chat. And I think Jen's question was for the audience, really curious about what questions potential authors ask themselves when you're trying to decide what journal you're interested in writing for. And I don't have an answer to that, but like Jen, I just sort of wanted to encourage, if people had questions or thoughts about that, I think all of the editors would really like to know about that.
I'm sorry, I missed that, but yeah, I love this question. I see that Abby Connick says she asked herself that regularly. And another attendee said that they asked what the citation and format style the journal requires, which sounds like a loaded question.
It does. So I'll add one thing about this, because and then maybe other editors will point in differently. I have really strong feelings, and PBSA, because I got to make these decisions for the journal. We have a style guide. We do Chicago. PBSA has its own adaptation of Chicago because we do bibliographical research and it's fussy. I worry about that. That's not the author's job to worry about that. And there are journals that will require at the moment of submission, you have to already be conforming to their style sheet. PBSA does not do that. After it's accepted, I might go back to you and say, okay, we do footnotes. Can you please take out all of your in-text citations and do it properly? But that's after it's been accepted. We don't expect authors to do that ahead of time. So the citation format style thing, Sarah, is real. I hear you on that. And I just want to say, like, PBSA gets that. Because it's exhausting, although there's like 50 million different styles. And just because I now have Chicago memorized does not mean that you have to have Chicago memorized. I don't know what do the rest of you do with your journals?
RBM uses Chicago too, which I understand is much to the chagrin / lament / quiet protests of others in librarianship who think that we should follow APA. Someday, after I leave, maybe that will be the case. But for now, I too like memorize Chicago, and I'm a big fan. But that's not the point. It's not about like what I love. It's about what Sarah said. Like, it's not a concern for me as an evaluator when I get the piece. It is. I used to say this until like literally 2 days ago. It's up to me to then make sure that all the citations are correct. It's a much longer story, audience, but RBM has an unseen anonymous copy editor, and that person is charged with doing that But regardless, I only get after authors to conform to the house style once their piece has been actually accepted. And I don't know what other folks use, so I'm going to stop talking.
I think that this is partially me saying do as I say, not as I do, right? But sometimes if I have the article finished, or if I have most of it finished, right, and I'm sort of trying to figure out where to place it, I will sometimes check. One, if I am quoting a lot of articles from a particular journal, then that is a signal that that journal cares about the same things I care about. That means I might be at home, my article might be at home there, right? It is not, I mean, that can come off a little bit as, if you think about it the wrong way, is like sucking up, or right, or that you're trying to sort of like, it's like, well, I'm quoting you all over the place, but it's like, if they are publishing the things that you are citing over and over again, that's your home. So you should at least knock on their door, right? And then another thing that I sometimes do is pull up their most recent 2 or 3 issues, especially if I can get my hands on them easily, quickly, digitally, and just skim the abstracts, right? Tell myself, again, like that sort of question of, can I imagine my abstract living side by side with these topics, right? Because what might and now granted, that can be sometimes a little that can sometimes be a little misleading, because sometimes a journal that publishes very, very like technical services heavy things now, just 3 years ago they were publishing a lot of teaching heavy things, right? And so it could be that that's going to give you a false sense of what the journal is actually looking for, or maybe there's a new editor and the new editor has new ideas about what should be appearing. But that's another sort of way to double check what is it that this journal is welcoming to, right? Is it just a sort of, those are the sort of quick knee-jerk things that or not knee-jerk, but like testing the waters kind of things that I will do to check if this is a good place for my article.
Other comments on citation formatting?
Printing history uses Chicago manual style.
Some bibliography or that. I mean that in the nicest
Yeah,
way.
book history uses Chicago, but we are embarrassingly lax in enforcing things. And we probably should be better about it, but it takes a lot of time. And they had a copy editor. We were published at Johns Hopkins University Press, and they had a copy editor, a long-term copy editor who passed away, and they're sort of like in between copy editors. And so a lot of the responsibility fell on that person, and now there's no one doing it. And frankly, the editors have been too lazy to step up and handle it. So if you're lax and sloppy about citation formats, then we're your journal.
Appreciate that, Greg.
I will back up something that John Henry said in the chat, that every journal uses its own in-house variant, because partnership does use APA with a variation of like not including DOIs and instead like hyperlinking titles. And I can't even look at APA. Everything I do is in Chicago. So when I see things, I'm like, it's probably fine. The copy editing team will get mad at me if I send this along to them and it's really bad, but like, I don't know. So yeah, there's support for you. There's even support for editors sometimes in dealing with citation styles that are not your natural habitat, and please don't let that be a barrier to you.
Okay. See, it's a friendly bunch of us. There's a question in the chat from Rachel Cohen. How many revisions does the average article go through in the publication process? And I was thinking about this too, like, let's talk about time. How much time, Sarah pointed out, it can take a while for books. How much time does it normally take? Anyone want to take this on right off the bat? I have thoughts.
I can start because I got to listen for the
Okay.
last one around. Generally at PBSA, maybe we tend not to accept things right off the bat. We tend to either ask for some sort of like accept, but we need you to do a conditional accept. There's all this, the language. So there's just accept, like you sent us the piece, woo, we love it, gets into the schedule, all good to go. That happens infrequently, just because writing is hard. The more common is we'll do accept with revisions, or some journals will describe it as a conditional accept, which is we accept your piece if you go ahead and make these revisions that the peer review has suggested you need to make. And so for those, they're sort of like, send it to us. There's going to be at least one more revision there, and then you'll work with me. And there's usually a little bit of back and forth during the copy editing stage. We do a fair amount of revise and resubmit. And so that you'll have to revise, you'll send it back to us. And then oftentimes those end up getting a conditional acceptance after that. Even if you get a sort of conditional acceptance, it'll come to me, and sometimes I will, wait, I'm trying to think about how to say this. You should definitely submit stuff to me. I'm a really nice editor. And one of the things that I sometimes do with submissions, so sometimes they'll come to me and they've been accepted, and I'll say, okay, but I think that you still need to, your argument isn't clear here. I think maybe this paragraph you have buried is actually your introduction. You need to move it up front. So it tends to be more on the level of tweaking as opposed to going out and having to sort of like do new research and rewrite as a whole. And all of that means, just asking the sort of the second question that Diane mentioned that wasn't asked quite in the question, is the length of time once a piece is accepted at PBSA. So whatever your initial was, like once you finally get that accept or a conditional accept, it will usually be out in print within, we do 4 issues a year. And right now, stuff that just got acceptance notices within the last couple of weeks, I am probably scheduling for the March 25 issue. So it's about a year, which is not as bad as some other journals, maybe not as fast as some other places, but that's the sort of variations that go into it.
Yeah, I'll answer that as well for us. So of the articles that don't get a desk reject, and you get a desk reject if you submit a piece and it's just not appropriate, we'll get weird stuff that often from India, oddly enough, that's like on biomedical engineering. I don't know why the hell they're sending it to us. But if it doesn't get a desk reject, then I would say half of them will get an immediate revise and submit from the author, from the editors, before we send it for review. And it's usually, I would say 90% of the time, it is you don't have enough of an argument, or your argument is buried, and please do that. Then when we send it out for review, there's almost always revisions to be done. I can't think of more than, I've been on the editorial board here for about 10 years now, and I can think of maybe 3 articles that the reviewers just said accept as is. So most of the time, it's going to have certainly 1 revision, and I would say about 50% of the times it will have 2 revisions. And then once the author has revised it that in a way that satisfies the reviewers, and sometimes we'll send it back for a second review if there was a lot of revisions requested. Once it's gotten past the reviewers, then there may be just minor revisions, and it's like copy editing stuff as it goes through the process of copy editing and proofs editing. As for the time to publication, yeah, with us as well, we only have 2 issues a year, but generally within the year, between the time it's accepted and the time it gets printed. In some cases, if we have a big queue, it'll be 18 months, but it's never been more than that.
I guess I could add a little bit to that. I never feel like there are like really specific things I can give about the timeline, but there are things like when I get something, if it's not a desk reject, it takes me a little while to find appropriate peer reviewers. I try to get that done in 2 to 3 weeks, but like sometimes it's summer vacation for everyone. I try to give peer reviewers a month. But some of them say, I'd really like to review this. Can I have 6 weeks? And then when I get everything, I usually try to turn around feedback to authors within a week. But I'm pretty flexible with authors. Like, can you do these revisions in a month? Do you need 2 months? And so those are places where actually the author is determining some of the timeline. And then I think probably similar to what Greg has mentioned, a percentage, I don't know if it's half. I wish I like kept track of this. A percentage do go through a second round of revision, sometimes a second round of peer review, which adds on a bunch of time. But what I find authors are often most surprised by in the timeline is after my work with them is finished, which is dealing with this whole peer review part of the process, it moves along to our production team, and it needs to go through copy editing and layout and proofreading, and those are also really substantial things. And so an author will feel like, I've finished this because I was told that all my revisions were great. Like, why isn't it coming out next month? Even someone who finishes their revisions on something right now, it won't get into our June issue because everything for the June issue already needs to be at layout. And so that means it's not going to come out until our issue at the end of the year. And that's like, I understand that that's a tough thing, but that's a really invisible part of the process, I think, especially for authors, but also sometimes for me as an editor, this whole production part of things. And sometimes we forget to factor that into our expectations for when we hope something will come out.
John Henry, did you want
Yeah, I think that one sort of thing to just always keep in mind is that the editor is your friend, right? This is not like, you're not getting a grade here, right? What's happening is that the editors, every journal has its own particular quirks, just like with the citation style. And it's part of the editor's job to, that famous thing is like, how do you carve a statue of a lion? Well, I take the block and I cut away everything that doesn't look like a lion, right? There is an article for this journal in this document you have submitted. Otherwise, they would just desk reject it. But the thing is that it is going to be conforming to a particular sort of style. Like there might be stylistic issues. There might be just an issue of like, could you pull this out a little more? So this is a dialogue typically between the editor and the writer, right? And that this is them attempting to, one, make this the best article it can be, but also make this the best article for this journal that it can be. And so as a result, this is not, I say this because I know that someone who has written and is somebody who also edits, writing is weirdly personal, right? It's this thing, well, I made this and it's partially me. Don't think of it that way, right? This is not, which maybe you already have that in your head, but it's just worth noting and remembering. I myself usually will go through at least one round of revisions on a book review with the author. But again, it's just sort of like, I need a little bit more here. I need a little less there. It's never a statement of, oh God, this is a terrible review. That's not, you're a competent individual and a competent writer. It's the question of how do I get what we need and want?
Yeah, and I'll really echo that because it is about what's right for the journal. And we get a lot of really good, really interesting articles, especially all these case studies, and they're just too specialized for us. And so I have referred numerous authors to printing history and to PBSA for articles that were more appropriate for them than for book history. So I would say for aspiring authors, if one journal says no, says it isn't right for us, that's generally not a euphemism that it's bad. It's literally, it's not right for us, but it could be right for others. And many editors, I think most editors, will be helpful and suggest other places that it could go.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of the time. It is 2:59 in the East. So we're just about out of time. I want to also acknowledge a couple things. Meredith Hale asked a question in the chat that John Henry answered. It was about book reviews, publications. I'm just going to read part of that now, but in case it doesn't get transmitted in the chat to everyone who couldn't make it today. The question was, for book reviews, publications, I wondered if the publication provides the reviewer with the publication, ARLIS NA, the Art Libraries Society of North America reviews does, and I always find this encourages me to write a review. John Henry's response was, I think that's pretty standard, RBM also does. And then there's some editorialization there, but essentially in today's world, we either send out ebooks or physical copies unless the reviewer specifies otherwise.
Though I'm always surprised by how many publishers' immediate response to, you want a review copy is, I'm going to send a physical copy. So what mailing address do I need? And that is, with me, that has actually caused a problem with one reviewer who preferred an ebook, right? Because it would make it easier for them to sort of hold it on the screen, on one screen while they worked on another screen, and they could sort of draw parallels more easily, I suppose, for their work habit. And I had to specify ebook, please, right? So even in these days when, you know, people are always, you know, although people are often saying, oh, you know, the printed book is fading out, and ebooks are the way of the future, which, you know, I suspect that all of us sort of have mixed feelings about the finality of that kind of a statement. A lot of publishers are still saying, no, the standard way to provide a review copy is physical. It's got to be physical, right? Which, I mean, I'm excited about that.
Diane, can I add like one tiny thing as we're
Yes.
just about to wrap up? I just wanted to share that if anybody's listening and is like, wow, I don't want to submit to PBSA. I really want to be an editor for one of these journals. PBSA, like Printing History, is also looking to appoint a new editor. My co-editor is stepping down at the end of his term at the end of June. We're hoping to bring on somebody at the associate level. I dropped a link in the chat. Even if it's not you, if you know somebody who think would be great for one of these positions, pass it on to them, and I'm always happy to answer questions. Because it is fun. I actually enjoy being an editor for a journal a lot more than when I was writing things to be published.
Thanks, Sarah. And I just wanted to also mention that the work of the editorial board on RBM is a like committee role, and generally the responsibilities are to help solicit new articles and also serve as peer reviewer in the peer review process. But if anyone else is just kind of vaguely interested in participating in RBM, you can contact me or contact John Henry. I'm gonna throw all the contact information I have on this slide in chat. That isn't exactly or always the contact information that our speakers have provided today, so please double check. And if there are any other questions, now would be super. In the meantime, one thing I will just add quickly too about the RBM timeline and revisions process. It essentially parallels everything that Sarah and Jen and Greg said. We have two deadlines. So one is January 15th and one is July 15th. Those are just there so that folks who feel like their lives are too complicated to know when things are due will know when things might be due. But the process can take up to a year, 18 months to go from initial submission to actual published thing. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to thank all of our panelists for taking time to be here today to provide your grace and your wonderful personalities. And I want to thank everyone who joined us from near and far and on the recording. There were 83 registrations for today. So this was a dream come true for me who thought that maybe no one would show. Anyway, as you go on and do things, please do let us know about it. We can't wait to publish you, at least I can't. So thanks for coming, everybody, and have a great day.